not just the song, the way it's sung, is really the message for this morning. This theme today is through the valley. And the valley, to me, is when our surface mind is simply focused on the effects of the world. And we can get lost, discouraged, depressed, disconnected, when we just look at what's happening out here and think that that's all there is. But the mountaintop, for me, is when we can see from a greater perspective. When we know, really, it was Albert Einstein that says, there's one question that will really shape and form your whole life. Do you think this is a friendly universe or not? And that equates to what Ernest Holmes says when he said, there is only good. There is not good and evil. God plays no favorites. There's good for all of us. And when we can get to that place of faith and knowing we are special, we matter, there's good for us, we have opportunities to share our gifts and talents, when we know that, and the trials and tribulations of our life are opportunities for us to step into the bigger picture, to know the bigger truth, that something more is going on right here than what we can see. Jesus, the great teacher and way-shower, said to us, you must become like little children. You must become like little children, or you will never get to the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven meaning that place of faith and trust and conviction for good and acceptance. But why would he say be like little children? Well, what do we know about little children? First of all, they're open, available, and humble. But then Jesus goes on to say, fear not, my little flock. Fear not, my little flock. For it is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. So there's fear in there, fear not. And what we know about little children is studies have shown, repeated studies, that they really are born with only two fears. The fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Two really protection-oriented fears. All other fears are learned. Most of them by the age of 6. From experiences, from early teachers. So our job is to move through the fear and hold the faith. Move from fear to faith. In Ernest Holmes' textbook, the Science Mind textbook, he says fear is man's greatest enemy. It keeps our perfection and our beauty and our wonder locked up. Fear, letting go of fear, is the greatest adventure of the mind of man. Fear is the reverse energy of faith. And it denies, fear denies just what James was singing about. It denies that God is all there is. So when we are called to become like little children, it's truly about letting go, releasing the fear that keeps us limited and stuck. The fear that is looking for the opinion of others to give us validation. And forgetting our validation comes from recognizing and knowing that we are one with God and one with all life. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is an interesting quote. He said, "It seems as though somebody or something gave us something too strong to drink when we entered this world, and we are in perpetual sleep." We call it the veil of illusion. But the perpetual sleep, but he goes on to say, but some of us choose to wake up. Some of us choose. Now, I want to be in that group, don't you? I want to be in the waking up group. Yes, sometimes waking up is hard to do. Yes, it is sometimes. But we can do it. So I think what we're waking up to is spiritual maturity. It's not waking up from the innocence and the openness and the availability and the humility of being childlike. It's waking up to the spiritual maturity to know that God is all there is. So what does that require of you and me to wake up? It first and foremost requires a willingness within us to grow, a willingness to become more, to not stay stuck to what is comfortable or what is known or stay stuck in the past, but to grow into a greater understanding and conviction to know the truth of life and to continue that urge, to express that urge to grow. Now, I heard a story of a little boy who went to bed at night, and in the middle of the night, his mom heard a big thud and went in, and he'd fallen out of bed. And she got down and she said, "Well, sweetie, what happened?" And he said, "Oh, Mom, I think I just stayed too close to where I got in." And if you and I stay too close to where we get in, we're going to fall and fall and fall. And this spiritual maturity is not about falling, because we all fall. We're humans. That's part of this experience. It's about how fast we get up. So just in your own being, just take a breath and be open. I'm willing to grow. Just be willing, because you have to mean it. You have to just open to that willingness. And the second part of growth is kids don't grow without proper good nourishment, and neither do we in spiritual maturity. We have to grow by opening our minds to new thoughts, to good thoughts and new thoughts. Now I'm going to give you a little test. When you think of this spirit, now you may call it God, you may call it infinite intelligence, creative energies, unlimited potential, whatever you call the vibrational energy of the allness of life. When you think of God, in whatever term you say, do you think of a heavenly dictator? Or do you think of the indwelling presence? And it may not be dictator, it may even be softened by director. Because if you think of God as a heavenly director, you think, oh, well, when I'm doing good and the right thing, I'm blessed, oh, thank you. But then when you make a mistake, which is part of this human experience and part of the big way we learn, we'll feel disconnected. We'll feel separate. We'll feel limited and fearful. But if you recognize that God is that indwelling presence, then we can live in the faith that we are powerful. We are wonderful. We are beautiful. We are magnificent. And we matter. No matter what's going on in this physical world, we matter. There is no one in this world that has exactly what we have. No one. We come here to give certain gifts and have certain talents to share, but we have to nourish ourselves with the knowing and recognition that I matter, I make a difference. Take a minute right now. Because that surface mind of ours, when we say I matter, I make a difference, that surface mind's going to say, oh yeah, right. You know what you just did yesterday? Or you know what somebody said about you? You know what happened? Or but moving into that place, I matter, I matter. Just take a moment right now and just think of something beautiful and wonderful about yourself. Something beautiful and wonderful. That's the seed of faith and knowing that there is something in you right now calling you to a greater expression of life. So we won't need the willingness to grow, we need nourishment, and that's not quite enough. We have to have the willingness to exercise and practice what we learn. Ernest Holmes said, teach and practice, practice, teach. That's all we ever need to do. We have to learn the truths, practice them so we develop that spiritual muscle, and then teach. We are here as leaders and students for each other. When I wanted everyone to stand at time of celebration, we're not in that alone. The energy of celebration belongs to all of us. And when we see people celebrating, and we may be down in the valley, we may have just gotten a health diagnosis, a job loss, there may be a death in your family or friends, there may be something that keeps you in the valley, and we see celebration and we're reminded that this is a cyclical, spiral world where we're here to learn and to grow. So in the 23rd Psalm, it says, "Yea, so I walk through the darkest valley, or the dark valley of death." I believe that many of us have a fear of death. Now, it could be the fear of letting go of things that die in your life, and we're called to die to things every day. We're called to die to old patterns that don't serve us. We're called to let things go, but when we're called truly to die when we're faced with physical death, it causes even a bigger fear to shake within us, because it's the total unknown. It's truly letting go. Now, in my life, we all have certain paths in our life that are straight and certain paths that are crooked. Now, in my life, my career path has been pretty straight. Now, I have always worked for what brought me joy and not for the money. At my age, I'm rethinking that. But it was really good at the time. Never lost a job, always been fulfilled. That's been pretty straight. The financial part around it's a little bit crooked, but the relationships. Kirk and I have had have I wanted to be married all those 40 years? I won't tell you that, but if you're in a relationship, you'll know the answer. But yes, it's been a wonderful journey, and it's been strong and true and faithful and dependable. But I faced a lot of death in my life, and I know a lot about death, and it's taught me a lot. I know what we know when we teach here is that we are immortal beings. The form changes, but the formless in us, our spirit, never changes. That we are on this continuous and eternal path of growth. And there are different planes and levels of existence that we experience as we learn and grow. Well, I had the gift of learning that firsthand from my beautiful 15-year-old daughter, just 2 hours before she passed, when she said to me, as she's serving me and a couple people some burritos she made, "Mom, do you believe when you're finished on this plane of existence that you can go at any time to do more important work elsewhere?" And I remember just locking into her eyes and saying, "Yes, Tara, I believe that." And it was 2 hours later that she made her transition in a very innocent accident. But what a gift. What a gift to me to understand when the veil is that thin that she could know and share that with me. And then a few years later, when my mom was passing, we were having some real difficulties in our family, relationship-wise. Yet, I'd always been really, really close to my mom, and I had the opportunity to be in the hospital with her and hold her in my arms. She was in a coma, but I could hold her in my arms as she was making her transition. And I knew everything she was afraid of. And I could talk to her and walk her through it, and I could just see with my internal eye, with my wisdom eye, when her soul left and she was free. And I also had the blessing when Kirk and I were fairly newly married. He shared an experience with me. Come on up, because I'm going to have you share this. About an experience he had that had changed his life. And it opened me to a new understanding again of the realm of infinite eternal life.
Thank you. Good morning once again. Some of you may know this story. I don't speak about it publicly, but I did write about it in a book. That way I don't know who's heard it and who hasn't. It's rather safe that way. But when I was 9 years old, I did have a profound experience. It changed my life in many ways. When I was 9, I loved to climb trees. I had made tree houses. And there was one I made in a huge pepper tree in our backyard, about 25 feet off the ground. Well, a friend and I were up in the treehouse. We had what was then called squirt gun rings, where you would squirt the back, push the back and would squirt water the other way. So he squirted me, and I stepped back off of the treehouse and fell about 25 feet, hitting my bike in the driveway, the kickstand cutting open my back, landing on my head. I was unconscious. I don't even remember clearly what happened other than stepping back, and when I was free falling, it just faded away. What happened a few seconds after that was I was viewing my body on the ground. My brother was there kneeling down beside me. There was blood all over. My mom was crying hysterically, giving a report to a policeman. I can remember the details so clearly to this day. And she was talking to the policeman. I can remember what she was saying. I can remember the buttons and the pink stripes on her dress. It was that detailed. And I was just sort of in awe of what I was seeing. No thoughts or feeling, but just going, well, this is interesting. Then all of a sudden, I see an ambulance pull up in the driveway, and I see them lift my body and put it into the back of the ambulance. And then I faded to black. I don't know how long I was unconscious, or they thought perhaps dead at that time. I don't know if it was hours. It was at least 2 to 3 hours. Maybe it was longer. I never found out. But I did awake in the hospital in a bed that had bars on the side and a net over the top. I guess at 9 years old, they felt that maybe I'd be frightened when I became conscious again. And I tried to get out of the bed. I don't know. But anyway, that was the explanation I was given at the time. So I stayed in the hospital under observation for a few days. They gave me 22 stitches in my back, and I was released. And that was early summer. As I mentioned, it was 1961. And in that day, nobody labeled anything as a near-death experience. I had no knowledge of metaphysics or anything like that. So I knew I had an experience, but I didn't know what it was, other than it remained with me. And when I was released home and spent the summer recuperating, I knew I had been changed inside. I didn't know how, I just knew something was different. I had a great knowing of things. Well, it wasn't until my young adulthood, in my early 20s, when I began to explore metaphysics and things like that. And I realized that I had a near-death experience. Well, I did not share that with anybody because I didn't want them to think I was strange. But I knew what I had experienced, except for when I blacked out. I don't know what happened in that term of being blacked out. So again, fast forward several years later, after we lost our daughter, I went to a hypnotherapist. Now, I don't know if anybody here has ever been hypnotized. I had no idea what to expect. I thought, when you're hypnotized, you don't remember anything. Well, it's not true. You're very conscious of what you're saying, doing, and feeling. But you're in an altered state that can bring up past experiences. So the hypnotherapist put me under and regressed me back to that blackout when I was 9 years old. Well, what I experienced, to this day, is still very emotional. As she regressed me back to that blacking out period, I all of a sudden felt like I was being thrust forward into the universe at a very fast speed, but very safe. All I could see was the dark sky and the bright stars. And the feeling was one that cannot be explained in human terms. A total feeling of unconditional love, support, non-judgment, and just total bliss, total love. That's all there was. And I just wanted to stay there. It was a euphoric experience. And in the hypnosis situation, I began to cry because I remembered that feeling of total love. So I'm being thrust forward, feeling this unconditional love, and I see a crest of light, and I just want to keep going towards that. I never felt so safe in my life. And I said, oh, I just want to keep going. And then a voice, or a thought, or something communicated, no, you can't go. You've got to go back. I said, darn it. I wanted to stay there. It was just so beautiful. But no, we have to go back. You have something to do. So I eventually regained consciousness back in the hospital. But the feeling that stayed with me was that experience of being in a place that unfortunately on the human level we don't get to experience. So from that age of 9, never had fear of death, always had a great understanding of what lies beyond this experience of life. And I know God, that power, that source, that presence is always there, supporting each one of us. And I feel blessed that I got to experience that on the level I did. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you, Kurt. I just told him I was very glad he came back. So there's something beautiful waiting for us, and for us that have had people that have gone on, we know there's something beautiful for them. And wherever we go, there we are. So let me read to you what Ernest Holmes says about this. He said, when false experiences will continue with us until the lesson is learned, until the soul turns from that which hurts. And to me, that meant until the soul turns from that which hurts ourselves or hurts others to its greater good. We have work to do. That's why I work harder all the time to keep on the road of ever-expanding good, to truly recognize that I matter, others matter, to support each other on their journey, to do whatever I can to be a teacher and a student in this precious place that we call life. Ernest Holmes goes on to say, when our last enemy is overcome, whether it's an enemy of thought, an enemy in our heart, our past, when the last enemy is overcome, we shall pass from one experience to another at will. The soul shall clothe itself in a body on whatever plane it finds itself that will express the soul on that plane. We know no man by flesh, but only by the Spirit. We are free. In closing, I'd like to just remember how blessed we are to be on this beautiful plane of existence together. This is the plane I feel that is the densest, but it's the one where you feel the most, love the most, hurt the most, connect the most. How blessed it is that we are here. And when we can move ourselves from fear to faith, we can experience it in such a different place. This is my version of the 23rd Psalm, only slightly revised. The Lord, which is another term for the indwelling God, is my shepherd, my guide, my way shower, and I have all I need right now. It allows me to rest in green meadows. It leads me beside peaceful streams. It renews my strength and guides me along right paths, bringing faith and constant assurance to my life. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, the worst trials, the valleys of loss and death, I will not be afraid. I know God is with me and in me. God's strength and support protects me and comforts me. Even in the presence of my enemies, a great feast of understanding is prepared for me. I am so grateful. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely God's goodness and unfailing love stays with me all the days of my life, and I live in and as God's love forever and ever and ever. Just take a breath on that. And I'm going to invite us to close the service by standing up. And I want you to just repeat after me. I walk in as and with the faith of God. I know that all is well. And I am blessed in all that I do. I know that I matter. I make a difference. I have gifts to share. And then turn to somebody else and say, and so do you. And so do you. And so do you. We are in this together.